So this week on Thursday night, we have a division matchup, an AFC divisional matchup of the Bengals, who obviously they just lost against the Texans, going to play the Ravens, who also just came off a loss against the Browns. Now, I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't want to be the Bengals. I'm assuming that Higgins is probably going to play, and he needs to play. Obviously listed as questionable here, but he was a game time decision Sunday. I'm pretty sure they kind of held him out because I think that they knew that they had a chance to beat the Texans without him. Obviously, the Texans, they really kind of proved that they are a team that can play in tight games, and CJ Stroud, just continues to impress, in his rookie season. And I'll say this, potentially MVP season if they are able to have a good end of the season. But moving on, we obviously look at this. Odell Beckham Jr., who they were saying was like, oh, he finally looks like the Odell of old. He's fast again. Questionable. Marlon Humphrey, questionable. I don't think it matters too much. And then Ronnie Stanley, their star tackle, questionable. But I'm not going to lie. If I'm the Bengals and I'm looking at Lamar Jackson and I'm looking at, Gus Edwards and I'm looking at the way that Houston just made our defense look way worse than it is, I'm worried about Lamar Jackson and Gus Edwards. I I don't I don't know what to say, but Baltimore, they've only lost 3 games at this point. They are 7-3 with 7 games left. I think that they are going to mentally prepare and that they are going to play a lot better than they did on Sunday. And I'm not saying that they didn't play well, but I think that Cincinnati is way more inferior on their D line, where it's like Lamar Jackson is probably going to be able to run a bit more. I don't think that the Bengals D line is bad by any means, but they don't have guys like Zadarius Smith and then, of course, Myles Garrett coming after Jackson, who's not able to escape as easily. And Cincinnati just doesn't have guys that are as, mobile on the edge as Baltimore. So I think that Lamar is going to be able to play his game. He's going to be able to run a lot. He's going to be able to pass. He's going to be able to extend plays quite a bit, unless they really scheme to contain him, where they're like, oh, you have to throw to beat us, which I don't think, I think that Baltimore can win that kind of game. I think I think that, looking at the 2 games that each of these teams played on Sunday, they were both close games that they're going to have to turn it around and play on Thursday night. So I don't really think there's that much of a disadvantage in terms of fatigue, because I think both games were obviously high scoring, type of thing. But I do also think that the Ravens, play a style of defense where it's like, how much is Cincinnati going to be able to really run against the Ravens? And looking, looking at these teams, you obviously have Chase having a very good year. Zay Flowers, pretty recognizable and good year as a rookie, with the possibility to get 1,000 receiving yards, to be honest with you. But then you also have Gus Edwards and Lamar Jackson, putting up a lot of touchdowns, over 20 between the two of them. And I think that Gus Edwards just, I mean, he's feisty, he gets around really easily. He's got pretty good speed. The blocking for the Ravens is pretty good. They have a very good O-line, in my opinion. It doesn't really, I think that it gets talked about quite a bit, but there's obviously other O-lines that are talked about more. I think that with that, they play very good complementary football where it's like the defense, isn't giving up big plays and and I'm just gonna say this. I think that this demographic is a little bit more spread out, but then again, analytics I don't think really take into effect. I think it's more of a numbers thing, but I don't really think they take into the fact that it is a division matchup. Obviously, it's prime time between two of the great QBs in the game right now, Burrow and Jackson. But I'm gonna say Ravens by 7. Well, actually, no, I'm gonna say Ravens by 6 in this game because I think it's gonna come down to the wire. But I do think that Burrow is gonna feel the pressure from. He's gonna feel the pressure from. He's gonna feel the pressure from the Ravens. I think. We're gonna go look at these two depth charts real quick, and obviously looking at this, you got Higgins questionable. I think that Jamar Chase has been having a good year, but I don't think it's been like anything great, I guess. And you've got the shaky O line where it's like they got Orlando Brown to improve their O line, but he is only on one side, for Cincinnati. And like I said before, I think that Trey Hendrickson is their one guy, and he's obviously questionable, a little banged up. Is the one guy that can maybe, do a good job of keeping Lamar Jackson in, but not Sam Hubbard. Sam Hubbard, I don't really think is going to keep, Jackson contained in this game. And then you look at, the Ravens, like I said, they obviously have Ronnie Stanley, one of the best left tackles in the league, even if he is a little banged up. I think he's been a little banged up all year, to be honest, but it hasn't mattered too much. Tyler Linderbaum, a great center, and Morgan Moses, a veteran right tackle that I think is, pretty good. But, so Jackson has the benefit of having a better O line than the Bengals. And I think that is another reason why the Bengals have had, so many injuries and Burrow, doesn't really sit comfortable in the pocket a lot, and I do think that it affects him a little bit, him being not fully confident in his O line. And it's the one weakness of the Bengals for the past few years because they lost the Super Bowl to the Rams ultimately because they couldn't protect Burrow and he was sacked a ton. And then I mean, even that postseason, it was like, oh, he gets sacked a ton. Their line is better now, but it still isn't completely fixed. Like it's hard to get that much talent for the O line as it is such a coveted thing amongst good teams in this league. But looking at the Ravens, you got Mandabik, you got Odafe, who is really good. Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, Jadavion Clowney, who seems to be it seems to me like he you know uh, keeps on journeyman, from place to place to place. But then you also look at the Ravens and you look at Kyle Hamilton able to have a really good. He was able to have a pick six early in the game that gave them momentum, and it kind of fizzled out near the end of the game. Because the Browns were able to ultimately contain and limit the points of the Ravens late in the game for them to make a comeback, which was insane. But, this defense on very good on the Ravens. And I just think that, you know, obviously you have Cam Taylor Britt and Chidobe Awuzie on the Bengals, and I think that they're kind of shallow at DB. So I think that Zay Flowers is going to be able to have a day. And I also think that this team just has good depth. I think even if Odell Beckham is on like a snap count because of his injury, I think that Mark Andrews is great. Zay Flowers, obviously Rashad Bateman, but I also think that Nelson Aguilar is a very solid like backup wide receiver that does good things. So I just think that they are overall they're pretty loaded. And clearly last week, Burrow struggled against, he struggled against the Texans who, I mean, he didn't really struggle, I guess, but he wasn't able to ultimately like win the game type of thing. And I think he's going up against a much better defense that is going to make it hard for him to do well because of, his O line. And because of that, that is the reason why I'm saying Ravens by 6.